Good afternoon, everyone. Now that the chairs are sorted, I think we can jump into the discussion. The previous panel discussion ended with mentioning that we need new or different types of government support, government policies. So I think that's what we will discuss as part of this panel discussion for both large-scale renewable projects, for distributed projects, a deep dive and a discussion on government policies, regulations. For the sake of time, we'll try to do it relatively quickly. We know that lunch is also coming. If possible, we would also allow to have a few questions from the audience towards the end as well. So in terms of the introductions, I'll leave it to the different panelists to quickly introduce themselves when taking the first question. Just a quick introduction also of myself. So I'm a partner at Roland Berger, management consulting firm, and I lead our energy practice across Southeast Asia. So let's go into the discussion. In terms of, we're already in October now. In terms of the key policies, key regulations, new policies across Southeast Asia in 2024, what are some of the, I would say, the top one or two that have been the most impactful in the region? What has been driving or hindering? We can also be negative a bit because it's sometimes also challenging markets across the region. And that's maybe a question first for Borohung and for Izzydeen. Yeah. Sorry, Borohung and Jack. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Jack here. I'm from SolarWest. I'm the Group Vice President of the group. We're taking care about business developments and all the asset investment, asset management, and also marketing itself. So this is the hot topic, people talking about RE right now. Then I think when we need to see about new policy launching, because RE is always policy-driven business, that we need not only national support regulator, we also need a company which they set this kind of policy as well. So in the past, I think last year about this, I think a lot of people is through Arena, you also can see we're talking about hope to be achieved in Asians, 23% of RE mix, this is what we're trying to achieve. So if I can see about few countries which in Southeast Asia that we know that are running different kind of policy that bringing impact about us, that for example, Indonesia, they lift up the limitations for maximum demands that more people can do it. That's why the adoption for RE is booming right now. At the same time, for Singapore itself, that people is looking about 2 gigawatt about the adoption for RE, green swap for energy as import from, this is the hot topic which cross-border people talk about this. And I think Malaysia definitely is a steady and stable country that we always continue launch about utility project, which is large-scale solar farm project, LSS. And lately, last year, we have about CGPP, is what we call it in overseas about VPPA. They let people to open up the market that they can adopt RE100. And lately, we have CREST. That's the topic that we discussed, that allow people can go until RE100, but they limit at the additional load only. There's a few, I think, impacts that create for Southeast Asia, also Asia market.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Borohung. I'm the CEO of Astrid Renew. Astrid Renew is an energy transition investment company owned by an infrastructure fund in Singapore called Seraya Partners. So collectively, we manage about 1.1 billion US in capital to invest in infrastructure, and on my end, on energy transition. On the question on policy, I think Jack has covered quite comprehensively the policies that the countries in Southeast Asia has announced this year. I think I will look at it from a different angle. So Jack has covered a lot on the policies influencing the demand for renewable energy. the availability of the supply of renewable energy is largely also dependent on macro trends, which are also heavily dependent on regulation, including the, the cost of panels and also the cost of capital. Right? So this year, for example, the reduction of the interest rates in the US would have made investments into renewable energy much more attractive. And also the reduction in the cost of solar panels has also made renewable energy a more accessible technology. So I think other than the demand side policies that many countries in Southeast Asia has rolled out, making distributed and also centralized renewable energy generation more accessible. The reduction in the cost of financing and also the capex cost of solar has also further encouraged the transition to renewable energy.
Thanks. Izzadin, I think you at GIZ, you also work with governments across the region on government policies. Anything you'd like to add?
Hi everyone. Sorry, because I'm sort of okay. My full name is Izzadin. I think government officer always like to call me Cik Din, even though I'm not a Kelantanese. So currently with the GIZ, we have 4 funder countries, Germany, UK, French, and also US. We have some programs under the G2G on the funding. I think I mentioned it earlier in 2 years ago during the same energy box, I think somewhere in November 2022. I did attend last year. So this is a program where we fund the study into using the Global North funding narrative to fit into helping the Global South. So I think if you deal a lot of United Nations program, we always talk about Global North and also the Global South. So the program we are ending, in my experience with the Kuala Lumpur City Hall, in less than 2 years, I faced 3 different mayors for the same program. So, but we managed to maneuver with all the ministry, with all the change of the government. So regarding to this, the things that Malaysia is quite developed. I think Malaysia and Thailand is just after the Singapore. I think some of the funds that are available, most probably GCF, Green Climate Fund, and my colleague doing the adaptation now are dealing at the ministry level using the GCF based in Incheon, Korea. And I think other than that, I think more than a dozen local authorities are getting a GF, Global Environment Facility. Is either the UNDP or UNIDO for some of the program. I think other than that, there's some fundings related to the ASEAN Development Banks. But again, if I compare, I always compare Malaysia with the rest of the Global South countries in this part of the world. We are quite developed. We have a very robust and established Act Bylaw, Standard Guideline, Roadmap, Outlook, compare. Even I also always tell other people from other countries, you are welcome to copy and paste because Malaysia is quite established. The thing is that, like Kuala Lumpur, just to be frank, there's a 20, 30, 40 megawatt solar if they want to go really near zero or net zero building. So there's a lot of opportunity by 155 local authorities in Malaysia. If some of you want to explore further, I think some of the solar companies already expand further. So I think, other than that, I think World Bank and IFC, they try to come to Malaysia, but I think again, any foreign funding into the local authorities in Malaysia need to go through the central banks and also the MOF. So I think, yeah, back to you.
Okay. In the previous panel discussion, we talked. There was a discussion on large-scale solar projects. If we now look into distributed renewables and also rooftop solar, maybe question for Riek. What are some of the key policies supporting or hindering rooftop solar or distributed renewables in general? And I still see a lot of rooftops that should or could have suitable solar panels but don't have. What's needed to really further spur that across the region?
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Riek from Saxon Renewables. So Saxon Renewables what we do is we are helping corporates or the small companies, SMEs, to achieve carbon neutrals or the 100% renewable energy targets. So sometimes it's too vague for everyone. For example, let's talk about the 100% renewable energy targets. So we have prepared roadmaps to our clients on the different regions. For example, some corporates that they are looking on to achieve 100% renewable energy across the certain time frames, for example, like 100% by 2050, then they have several operations in very different countries. And they are looking at how can they actually steps by adopting on-site solar systems, then off-site VPPA arrangements, up to the unbundled RECs procurement strategies. So when it comes to the policies, regulations, and for the rooftop, particularly for rooftop projects. So we are also a solar PPAs provider in Singapore. So we see there's a very different challenges across different countries, across the Southeast Asia. So when we talk about all these challenges, when we talk about all these regulations, sometimes we are talking about why these countries is not given so supporting in the very specific renewable energy frameworks or all this. But when it comes back to a lot of the countries' perspective, they have to balance between the government's politicals, the country's economics, and also for the technologies constraints, especially like the grid infrastructures. For example, let's say we talk about Malaysia. Of course, we want to change all the energies from coal to natural gas or from natural gas to more renewable energies. But we also have the balance between the economics point of views. Will it the increase of the electricity tariff will affect the economy or not? So when we talk about the whole Southeast Asia, I would think that the key policies or the things that we really look into is two things. So it's about the export side, especially on the rooftop solars. So we talk about first maybe the enable, whether you are allowed to install solar or not. Then the secondly, it's the accelerator, you are allowed, but how can you push it faster in the regions? So when you talk about you can install solar or not, so for example, you have fund, you are using a lot of the consumptions, but you are in Indonesia, but you are not allowed to install because it's a quota base. You have to apply the quotas, and every region have a different quotas. Even you have the fund, all this, you have the urge to install solar, but you still have the limitations on the regulations on whether you are allowed or not to install solar. Then when come to the export parts, that a lot, when we talk about Malaysia, we see the net energy metering histories. 1.0 when you can export at a very lower rate, but it changed the export rate to the higher, then we see a very increase of the adoptions of more renewable energy projects, more solar projects, rooftop solar projects. So a lot of the countries, we should feel really happy and grateful in Malaysia. A lot of the countries out there, they are still not allowed to export. For example, like Thailand is not allowed to export any energy at all. Vietnam maybe 10% at a very lower rates. Philippines also not allowed to export if, let's say, you are more than 100 kilowatt peaks. So in Indonesia, you're also not allowed to export. So I think if, let's say, we want to talk about speed ups the adoption of rooftop renewable energies, the demand is always there. There's a lot of demands. There's a fund that we're willing to invest in, but I think the export part is really what each countries that really need to treat. But of course, we understand that there's the limitations of every country's the politicals, the economics, and the grid constraints. So I would say that the policies that focus on to tweaking this according to each country's difficulties. No policy is the best policies, but the policies that really can best fit to their specific countries will be a good policies.
Christopher, over to you, and Sarawak, and maybe also please introduce yourself. And we know Sarawak also as a place that is spearheading things related to hydrogen, carbon capture, etc. And at the same time, there's also some rural areas where there's still lack of reliable electricity, and what's the role that renewables can play there, and what is the Sarawak government doing to drive that?
Thank you, Dieter. Yeah, my name is Christopher. I'm the project manager for Sarawak Energy Berhad. For those that not familiar with Sarawak Energy, we are the sole utility company in the state of Sarawak. Currently in Sarawak, we have a generation capacity of around 5,700 megawatt, predominantly using renewable hydropower, supported by other thermal resources. And in the long run, Sarawak Energy intend to keep the generation mix with more than 60% of renewable. Coming back to your question regarding the rural electrification, in Malaysia, there are still many villages that are still not properly electrified, especially the case in Sarawak as well as in Sabah. Okay. There are significant number of the villages and communities that are under advantage, where they are still rely on diesel generator for their sole source of electricity. And in Sarawak case, for the past 10 to 15 years, there are gradual rural renewable energy development, especially in the solar and battery projects, where this is the choice of technology that we implement to support rural electrification, especially for an off-grid solution. In 2016, the Sarawak government actually have implemented a very successful campaign or program called Sarawak Alternative Rural Electrification Scheme, SARES in short. The objective of the government is to have a full electricity coverage, particularly for the remote community in rural Sarawak, where the electricity grid is too far to be grid connected to the village. So far, we have successfully implemented this project since 2016 until today, with more than 550 villages already electrified, with more than 15,000 households. In terms of install capacity of solar panel or battery, it may not sound impressive, but the key thing here is the outcome is how this program by the government has changed the livelihood of the rural community in Sarawak. So I think this is one of the better example where the government spearheaded the program and with the participation from Sarawak Energy as the utility company. And we have made this a very successful program. Thank you.
Be back to Borhung and Enrique. If we zoom in a bit on the different incentive structures, pricing mechanisms for renewables in the region, I mean, we've seen a lot of different incentive schemes, the feed-in tariffs, net energy metering, the auctions for larger scale kind of projects as well, including here in Malaysia. How do you see those types of incentive schemes, pricing schemes evolving? What's the outlook for that?
Okay, so there are a couple ways to look at the incentive structure. I think the feed-in tariff and net metering are more of the traditional kind of incentive structure, which are getting getting replaced by more innovative and market-driven incentive structures. One of the key incentive structure is renewable energy credits, RECs. I think I'll let Rick talk about that later. That's his main business. There are also incentive structures related to the investment and ownership of renewable energy. So the RECs is on the use of renewable energy, right? On the ownership of renewable energy, for example, tax credits like the JITA that we have in Malaysia, such as one incentive structure that has been around for like the past decade and has been a key driver of making renewable energy more attractive to financially capable companies. Second is, for example, green financing, right? Like green loans with lower interest rates. So overall, the incentive structure would move towards a more market-driven structure where there's a willing lender, a willing financier, or a willing user of renewable energy that is giving preferential terms to renewable energy projects. Yeah, maybe I'll leave Rick to talk about some of the demand side incentives.
Thanks, Bong. Still keeping some topic for me to, to talk. Yeah, I mean, regarding the incentive parts, I believe that when Malaysia just started, we start off as a feed-in tariff. Then we may think that feed-in tariff may not be really sustainable because it requires external funds to really subsidies to the people that who install the solar. But then I would see that regarding the incentive, I would say that the pricing structures, now the trend is like slowly move on to the government incentive towards to the to pass on this kind of the incentive to the corporates. So it's like asking the corporates to actually make the projects attractive. So that's what happened with REX after that to make it the mechanisms on how to pass on this pricing incentive from the corporates, the private corporate worlds. So for examples, initially we have net energy meterings. Then in Malaysia, we try to have a NEDA schemes, which that you supply all the solar system you inject into the grid and you get paid by the NEDAs according to the 30 minutes of the S&P price. But with that kind of structures, it's not really, most of the time it's not so bankable because the S&P price is really fluctuated. And the financial institute, of course, they don't like it, right? Then slowly on, we stuck in there until the corporates really come in and they say, yeah, I want to off-takes. And I'm willing to sign the striking price with you to make your projects bankables. So from there, we try to have like a CGPP, the first this kind of projects that we actually asking the corporates that who really need the renewable energies, they need the RECs in order to achieve their renewable energy targets locally. So they're willing to sign this off-takes agreement with you for long terms. Then it makes the projects becomes more healthier in terms of the financing returns to the EPC or the developers, and also it's bankable and it can make the projects happens. So after the CGPP, we will see that this kind of incentive, pass on the incentive through the corporate is really successful. Then now we have the CRES that we ask the CRES that who actually wants the long-term renewable energies that who sign directly with the project owners. Then they have a very fixed and secure kind of income for long terms. And it makes a lot of the projects that initially couldn't be materialized, then now to make it materialize because we got the corporates become the incentive behind on all these developments of the renewable energy systems.
And on the CRES and third-party access, there was also a discussion earlier in the day, so let's not go too much further into that, but just a quick question also for Jack. How do you see it, I mean, especially also in a Malaysian context, do you see the TPA and the CRES in the current form as something attractive that will drive renewable growth?
I think TPA is something about not only Malaysia, I think Southeast Asia and Asia market that everyone is looking for it because they embark the sustainability roadmap for a lot of companies itself they go into their RE goals. For Malaysia sides, that we are happy that finally our government launched the no quota limits that everyone are free to be applied for this CRES as long as the grid able to support this. Then from the policy wise, I think that is a good initiative. But if you ask me, I do have several suggestions that come across that we helping a lot of multinational companies to drive to plan about their 3 to 5 years decarbonization roadmap, not only in Malaysia, in few countries. We come across first thing that the transparency for the willing charges is something about will affect the adoption for about the RE. Definitely, if some of the company they're looking for green source, they need to pay premiums. So certain of premium because they hedge against future energy, but certain of requirement and transparency, they hope to be understand this. Like I think give a very good example for like Philippines. PEP plan, Philippine Energy Plan, about this, that they have very clear structure for their Renewable Energy Act 9513. They have very clear about this. What do you do? How the billing charges and transparency about this. And lately, the framework being firmed about DPPA for Vietnam and PDP-8 plan. There's something about we can look into this. So to compare others country, that definitely, like just now, I think one of the company like Netflix, Grant mentioned about Taiwan. This is a few, Japan also. This is a few country I think that Malaysia can reference from them for as well. Then they can boost up the adoption for RE. Because at this moment, we still enjoy the, like Rick say, honeymoon time, that we still don't have a carbon pricing. We still have good incentive for this. So our electricity price still at the certain of, compared with Southeast Asia, we still enjoy the honeymoons. That's why the adoption for CREST might be being affected as well.
Izidin, and moving on to the cross-border power trade, also mentioned already earlier this morning with some of these projects of cross-border connectivity that seem to be moving forward, and also the role that Singapore is playing in that respect. What's your view on that? And maybe also a question, is this mostly driven by government, or is there also a role for private companies to play a role in the interconnector, the cross-border capacity infrastructure?
Okay, regarding that question, I think maybe it's hard to say that it's more towards a regulatory misalignment, but basically it's more towards every country have their own narrative storyline, and also the needs that they need to fulfill when it comes to energy as the main source. I think we look at the COP28 last year, where everyone talking about the transition fuel and also destination fuel, whereas all the oil and gas countries are looking gas as the destination fuel rather than the global north narrative is more towards the transition fuel. So I think what I always preach, or I always tell all my funder in the global north, every country is a unique, no one size fits all. So everyone have the people that need to be fulfilled, and also pricing mechanism, and not forget for the past 1 year, geopolitical came into considerations also, and also it takes some tolls in terms of the cross-border project. But anyway, there's always some opportunities when it comes to the infrastructure. So we see our neighbor, which is Singapore, leading in getting more cleaner energy from our neighboring countries. There's always delay. Anyway, if you have experience dealing with a government agency, it takes time. There's a lot of processes and people that you need to handle and taken care of. So it will, I think eventually if you compare like 10 or 20 years ago, most of the government in this region, especially ASEAN, such as Malaysia, are moving towards, and then we can see with the current, our Ministry of Energy, which is our Deputy Prime Minister, is moving faster compared to the last year. So I think we have seen a lot of liberalization. So I think if you remember before COVID, someone said about democratize. So I think we are moving towards that, but it takes time. It's not, it's a journey. It's a journey that maybe I may be not alive by the time we are in 2050. But the thing is that whatever that commitment made by whoever in the net zero or the carbon neutral, maybe most of us will not be around in 26 years' time. So it's a journey that we need to go through. It's part of the journey. It's like taking care of your child, so that will not spoil you. Because we know our generation is already spoiled in terms of the fossil fuel usage. Yeah, back to you.
And maybe back to Sarawak, Christopher. I mean, you talked about electrification, renewables in rural areas. What about renewables more broadly in Sarawak? I mean, there's naturally already a lot of large-scale hydropower. What about spurring the growth of other types of renewables in Sarawak?
Yeah, for Sarawak, for the past 40 years, the Sarawak government as well as Sarawak Energy have been focusing our priority on developing our natural resources in hydropower to meet the need of the economic development in Sarawak. More recently, we have spent our priority and focus to develop our own capacity in terms of solar generation. This is to ensure Sarawak energy strategy as security, as well as to have a more diverse resources for our state energy generation mix. Under the Sarawak government post-COVID development strategy 2030, the state government aimed to increase the solar generation capacity up to 300 megawatt by the year 2030. So for Sarawak Energy as the sole utility company in Sarawak, we have to take up that challenge. For example, we together with our partner, foreign partner, have started building a 50 megawatt floating solar in our Batangai hydropower reservoir. So it will be completed hopefully by end of this year. Okay. So that is one of the major projects that we are currently involved in. And we are also considering to extend further the capacity of the solar floating solar in Batangai up to 160 megawatt. Okay. So that is an example of a project that we are currently dealing with. And to look beyond the current project, we also have the opportunity as well as the potential to expand similar scheme in our other hydropower reservoir, especially in Bakun and Murum. So the opportunity is always there to a larger scale. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time for Sarawak in terms of solar power generation in the coming 5 years period.
We talked so far about policies, regulations, more specifically towards renewables, but there's also policies, mechanisms related to carbon pricing that have an impact on renewables. I mean, we have the CBAM in the EU. We have Singapore already having a carbon tax in place. Thailand has announced one. Other countries, including Malaysia, are considering one. What's your outlook on that? Will there be carbon taxes in the region beyond what we currently have? And to which degree will those types of carbon policies impact the growth of renewables?
So, our panelists, we have another 5 minutes more for the discussion. Thank you so much.
So regarding the CBAM, we all know that it's origin from the EU lah, basically German lah, one of my funder lah. So I think it affects cement, fertilizer, steel, hydrogen, electrics. So I think this CBAM said, if I'm not mistaken, the central bank is coming out with the green finance taxonomy. I think later on the whole country need to be educated the difference between the sustainable financing, green finance, and also climate finance. If I'm not mistaken, government just announced last week there will be a carbon tax next 2-3 months. We see how it will affect as long as you have a long-term PPA. So I believe some of our clients last time used to ask whether we can shorten the PPA to 15 to 18 years. But nowadays, it looks like with all this impact, the minimum is 21 to 25 years of a PPA. So I think, yeah, financing is there, and the CBAM, we just wait. The thing is that in Malaysia, we need a carrot and stick. Same goes to RE as a solar. We are reducing the fossil fuel from the energy supply. Same goes to the using energy efficiency. You are reducing the energy demand. So once you have already have an act and bylaw on the RE side, which is the supply, and then now we're going to have a regulation related to EE, which is on the energy demand, soon to be regulated, to be announced, to be enforced into the industry. There will be a good chance for every industry to buckle up and also change the way they do business, because we know we cannot run away with this CBAM if you have a business with them. And then last but not least, just to inform you that I'm in the final month of the GIZ. I will join some of the, IEOE and also PMC consultant. I think some of you already know that I already joined North Consult Engineering. Yeah, back to you.
Thanks. Would also be good to at least have a few minutes in terms of questions from the audience, and that's why I'd like to ask one final question as part of this discussion here for Jack, Borohung, and Enrique. Just very briefly, in terms of new policies, new regulations in the next 6 to 12 months, what's your expectation?
I think for the new policy itself, that one of the areas that we can look into this is about green financing, about the ownership of the asset, which I'm looking at. People can own the RE asset in South Asia, like for example, Malaysia, because a lot of funds and overseas investors or people, well-established developers, they hope to own asset and boost the market adoption for RE. But at the same time, they might be limited control with the ownership, that they need to be Malaysian to be a majority, and they have to, like, give an example like LSS5, 8 years that they cannot change the shareholder, that limited the adoption rate for big, because as a green asset, people might need to recycle the fund itself. So others feel ideas, I think I left over to my lovely friends that they share to you.
I believe that there will be increasing initiatives to try to liberalize the electricity market, but with a lot of caveats and restrictions, similar to what we are starting to see in Malaysia. Then it will take a much longer time for these liberalization to be then optimized. One market that we can look at, which is already very mature in energy and electricity policy, is like China, where the renewable energy penetration is already huge. But even then, the liberalization of the electricity market is slow, right? So I think for Southeast Asia, there will be increasing countries trying to allow, like for a test site or initial policies to allow something like a third-party access, but with many restrictions, and then it may take like a decade or more for those restrictions to then come down and become optimized.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Borohung mentions, to liberalize the electricity markets. So, and also we talk about the optimizations part. We can take like Singapore as a good examples, that even the rooftops, the exportation of the rooftop, or all the small projects can even do VPPA by themselves. We can help the small companies to aggregate the exports and become a VPPAs to a corporate buyers that in Singapore. In Singapore, because of all these liberalizations, some of the local developers, they even do free energies to the consumer. What they want is only want the racks and also the export. So because they want to export, then they can do a VPPA to the corporates that who willing to offtake the export in the long run. Right?
Okay, I think we may have time for one, maybe two questions from the audience, if there's any. And if so, please also state what's the question and if there's any particular person you're addressing the question to. Any question? No? Okay, then I think we can have a lunch, and I would like to thank all the panelists for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,